Welcome to the Black Sparrow Media Internet Broadcast Network.
You are listening to Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a podcast about Linux, open source, and amateur radio for everyone. Now here are your hosts, Russ, K5TUX, Cheryl, W5MOO, and Bill, NE4RD.
Well, hello everybody and welcome. You have tuned in to episode number 534 of the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. This is Linux in the Ham Shack, and this is our deep dive edition. So thanks for joining us. And I guess there's not a lot of preamble tonight. We're just going to get right into our topic. But before we do that, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves. For the on assignment, once again, for a deep dive, Cheryl, W5MOO. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
All right. So we're actually not too late tonight. So this deep dive will be full of information and text written by AI because we're all getting lazy in our old age, or just because we're getting lazy. Anyway, this is my favorite kind of deep dive because it's the one where I'm not going to talk a lot. I'm going to say some very negative things about the topic for tonight, and Bill will give me all the positives that will help to correct my view of our show for the evening. And what we are going to discuss tonight is CQRlog. It's a thing that we have talked about many times on this show, but we have never dedicated an episode to it. And we're going to do that tonight. But since I don't use CQRlog, and Bill actually uses it for his authoritative log recorder, I guess you would say,
yeah,
we're going to let him espouse all of the wonderful points of CQRlog, and he's going to convince me that I should be using it. And I can assure you that will not happen. But go ahead.
Well, let's first start out with our AI portion of the podcast, where basically I asked ChatGPT to summarize CQRlog for the intro to this, and I told it to focus a little bit on the oddball things, including the programming language, the UI toolkit, the database. So here you go. You get just a few minutes of this, so you can fast forward if you'd like. But this is CQRlog is an advanced software solution designed for amateur radio operators who are interested in logging their contacts and managing their amateur radio stations. It stands out in the amateur radio community for its comprehensive feature set, efficient logging capabilities, and support for various radio control and communication protocols. And this is licensed under the GPL v2. As for programming language, CQRlog is developed using the Free Pascal programming language. Free Pascal is mature, as we all know, because it's ancient, a versatile open source programming language that is compatible with Delphi. It allows for creation of high performance applications across multiple platforms. The choice of Free Pascal enables CQRlog to offer a balance between speed and ease of development, unless you've actually tried editing some of it, making it capable of running efficiently on various operating systems such as Linux, macOS, and Windows. The UI toolkit, this is the graphical user interface of CQRlog, is built using Lazarus IDE, which is an open source development environment for Free Pascal. Lazarus uses the LCL, or the Lazarus Component Library, which is very similar to Delphi's VCL, which is the Visual Component Library. The LCL is designed to be cross-platform, supporting the development of native applications for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, and even more platforms with the same codebase. This approach allows CQRlog to maintain a consistent user experience across different operating systems while taking advantage of native performance and integration. That's kind of interesting. Database. This is we had a whole topic based on databases and logging for one of our big chats. CQR utilizes the MySQL or MariaDB database system for storing log data, QSL information, and various configurations. MySQL, MariaDB is robust, reliable, and efficient open source relational database management system. It provides CQRlog with the capability to handle large volumes of data efficiently, perform complex queries quickly, and ensure data integrity. The choice of MySQL MariaDB also facilitates advanced features like logbook sharing, remote access, and data backup and recovery. As for features, CQRlog is rich in features that cater to the needs of the amateur radio enthusiasts, because we're all enthusiasts. And some of the features include logbook functionality, that's a given, DX cluster support, so it integrates with online DX clusters, QSL management, both for electronic QSL, that's via eQSL, Logbook of the World, and several others, and paper QSL card management for confirming contacts. Award tracking helps operators track their progress towards various amateur radio awards and recognitions. Radio control offers support for controlling a wide range of radio models directly from the software. Now, that is via rig control D, and as well it can use FL rig. Let's see here. Digital mode interfaces can be interfaced with the software for digital modes like RIDI, PSK. So yeah, it integrates pretty well with WSJTX and JTDX, FL Digi, what have you, for those particular modes. And let's see, it has advanced search and statistics, provides powerful search tools, and generates detailed statistics to analyze your logbook data. Okay, thank you, AI. That was so inspiring. I mean, that's all we can say about it. It's such a great logging program. That's the end. Bye. No, just kidding.
Okay. Here's where I disagree. No, go ahead.
No. Well, CQRlog is one of the applications that is included within the Ham Radio Pure Blend meta package. So if you happen to be using, the LHS install or one of the very many distributions that are using the Debian meta package for that, you probably have CQRlog actually installed on your distribution. But if you don't have it, you generally can go to your distro. And in the case of Debian, obviously it's right there. You just apt-get install CQRlog. You will have to be mindful of the database. And I have talked about this on many previous episodes and several YouTube videos about the fact that you really wanted to have MariaDB, although I have seen it run fine with MySQL in some native cases. You will find out right away as soon as you launch the program the very first time. As for distributions like Fedora, I believe you need RPM Fusion. I don't think that's in the regular distro repos, but you can as soon as you install RPM Fusion, as you should as a Fedora user. You will easily find CQRlog and everything else that you need to install to make your Fedora distro ham radio ready. And if you're like me, really crazy and running Arch, you just install CQRlog through Pacman or PAMAC or one of the many others. Many other ways you could install packages on a Arch box, Octopi and stuff like that. But anyway, most of those are just interfaces to Pacman. But once you get it installed for the first time and you load it up, and if it will first prompt you and says, "Is this a new installation of CQRlog?" So if you've never used it before, it should prompt you for that. You hit the yes button, and it'll warn you that this may take some time because it's going to create data structure and everything else for your application. If that works out fine, and MySQL or MariaDB didn't, do the puke and chuck, you will be greeted with a small window that has your log, and it's normally named, I believe, new log 1 or new 1 or something stupid like that. I would take this opportunity to go ahead and hit the edit button and rename the log so it's named, maybe your call sign or something useful to you, just out of pure cosmetics. And then you want to click that button that says just automatically open the log when you start the application. So that way it automatically goes into the main CQRlog interface when you do that. Now, the main CQRlog interface is, we'll talk about Russ's problems later. You can read everything generally. It does respond to dark mode installations automatically. I'm using dark mode here, so my CQRlog is dark. and all the inputs and everything else are white text on a dark gray background, so it's quite attractive for a dark mode interface. If you're using a normal light interface, it will look whatever your light interface looks like with the proper highlighting and whatnot for your interface. Now, you could just stop right there and not configure anything, but you want to go in and really update the settings of this thing. So you would go into File and Preferences, and this is where this gets pretty deep into all of the things that you can change within the context of the application. There's things within the very first tab, which is Program. In here is any kind of weird stuff that you need for your internet connection. They do have the ability to use a proxy or whatever else. You can also set up your default web browser should you want this to actually open a web browser. You can have it check for newer versions of the program on startup, as well as DXCC tables and QSL managers. So we'll keep track and update all of that stuff. However, they did have one bad release of a DXCC table one time, which basically killed everybody's ability to start the application. So yeah, one time out of the last, I don't know, I've been using CQRlog for probably 15 years. So one time it wouldn't start because it broke. But all you had to do was rename that file, which it saves in your CQRlog config directory, and it went on its merry way, and it was no longer a problem. But it did freak me out when it happened, because I was like, okay, now it's time to get a new logger, which, once Russ starts talking, he'll tell you about getting that new logger and not using this. The next tab is going to be the station, and this is where you're going to put in your call sign, your name, your QTH, all that good stuff that you want in there, including mailing address, club memberships, anything that's important to you to have as your basis of information for your QSL cards. If you want to print labels or something like that, this does have that capability of doing that. So you can fill it out as complete or not as complete as you want. I would minimally have your call sign, your name, your QTH, and location in there. Definitely going to help you out. The next setup area is your new QSO. So this is how it behaves when you start a new QSO. And this will be where you'll set up some pre-settings, like default values for your RSTs, what you want to be populated in there, like 599 for CW and 59 for single sideband, what frequency you want it to start on, as well as a power level you want it to input as the power level for your device. So if you're always QRP, you can just plop 5 in there, and you don't have to worry about logging that every time. It'll be a default value in your actual log. There's many options here too on what to do with satellite information, satellite modes. Do you want to refresh data after you save the QSO? Do you want to enable automatic search up for call signs in ham QTH or QRZ? Do you want to ignore ham QTH and QRZ QSL info? Stuff like that. That's where you're going to find all of this for your new QSOs. Visible columns will be your next configuration point. I haven't changed any of these, but you may want to for specific awards and stuff like that. There are things that you can track in here specifically for, if you're doing county specific stuff and you just want to see that on the log screen. It's not visible by default because not everybody does that, but they have the ability. You can show all of these columns, including like QSL manager, locator, my locator, operator, distance, IOTA, award, county power, DXCC. Yeah, lots and lots of columns, including stuff for contesting. So like contest name and whatnot. Bands, much like WSJTX, you can select which bands you want to support out of the box. This one has the same kind of thing. And surprisingly, I don't have 5 megahertz checked. I gotta check that on mine. And it has pretty much everything from the 136 kilohertz all the way up to 76 gigahertz. So, and you can still plop in stuff. You can still log things that you actually don't have here, but like these would be your band drop downs for navigating your radio control and stuff like that. If you want to use the log's radio capabilities, like to connect to Rig Control D, if you actually want it to be able to switch frequencies and stuff like that for you, you can do that within the context of this. And this band selection will allow you to have quick switches for your bands. The TRX control is the next one, and this is where you'll set up your rig control D. And it does use rig control D to do almost everything. So if you're using FL rig, which I was using FL rig for a long time, here's where I would tell rig control D to use FL rig. So you get a combination of both of them. So it will actually use rig control to connect to FL rig. Or if you have rig control D already running on startup, which you should if that's what you're using for your rig control, you can just have your rig control connect to the ham lib net rig control and plop in your ports that are important to you. And it does have the ability to run 2 different radios connected to this. I'm not sure if you can go beyond 2 different radios. I've only ever had 2 connected to the log, but it does have the ability to configure 2 different radios at this point. The rotator control works exactly the same way. It uses rotator control D, so rot control D. And it also allows the ability to control 2 different rotators. So setup would be on your own, obviously. Modes is the next selection area for setup. And this is where you can predefine some filters for each radio, some default filters for the CW. So right now, like by default, if you switch into CW using the log program here, it flips the filters to 500 hertz on this particular setup. I'm generally using the radio at this point when I do CW, so I'm playing around with the filters all the time to get the right filter settings. So I generally don't use any of this, but it has settings for CW, sideband, RTTY, AM, and FM. QTH profiles. QTH profiles are important if you do stuff that's not from your station and you need to log this special contact from a different area. So think like you're doing POTAs and you're going to be in a different state or a different county or different, all different location where you're going to get a different certificate from Logbook of the World. This is important to have so you can actually tag those contacts to a different QTH profile. And those will become important when you need to export that log and send it off to somewhere that's cares about where you actually started that call from. And you can define them, you can modify them, you can add more, whatever you want to do there. Export is the next tab. Export just sets up what you want to have in the default export file. So this will be in your ADIF. So by default, it has some basic stuff that most programs will take in and consume. You can change that. And add things like your Logbook of the World confirmations, your EQSL confirmations, and everything else like that. So that will all be in there. DX cluster is where you're going to set up your DX cluster connections. And you can set up some specifics there, like showing spots for certain bands and not showing spots for other bands. You can do some pre-filtering here just for your station, so you don't have to go in and filter it later on in the DX cluster app, which you can. Fonts, they have the ability to change the fonts within the application. And this could address any issues you have with spacing or sizing and stuff like that. If your UI does not play well with this, you can change everything or you can use the default settings. The next one is worked all zones, ITU zones. It's just how it's highlighted and colored and whether you want the information shown or not. IOTA is another tab, same thing. Memberships. This is where you'll track your clubs. So if you've been a member of club from, someday to someday, whatever, you can actually pre-fill all this stuff in your log. And they have a drop-down list of lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of clubs. So if you're part of like CW Ops or, Quarter Century Wireless Club, whatever, you can pop them all in there. Let's see. Band map. Yeah, band map. You can adjust the settings within the band map. So that's supported. XPlanet is supported if you want to look at a map. And you can show stations from anywhere, from your DX cluster, from your band map, from WSJTX. You can do all kinds of projections. I don't use it. If you like looking at maps, there are other applications that do that. So you don't necessarily have to use this, but it is available. Zip code tracking is another option in here for the setup. I don't use it at all, but if you wanted to do something with zip codes, you can do that. Logbook and EQSL support. This is where you'll put in your username and password for those services. And if you have, I believe, let's see, is there anything specific in here that's important? Blah, 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 blah. I use all the default settings, except for obviously the username and password is mine. CW interface. This is where you actually plug in your how to get to your CW interface. So if you have a WinKey or USB or a K3 NG key or something like that, that's where you're going to find those settings. So you can do CW directly from the application itself. So right from CQRlog, you can actually open up a window and just start typing, and it'll start sending CW for you, like many of the other interface apps like PyWinKeyer and stuff like that do. Okay, another setup interface here for FLDigi and WSJTX. And in my case, I'm using JTDX, which changes out the same way. So and here's where you'll set up where your FLDigi is and how you want the log to handle interacting with that particular application. So you'll have the ability to use the frequency that FLDigi sends or that CQRlog sends. Same thing from WSJTX. And the mode, where do you want to take the mode from? Do you want to take it from CQRlog or do you want to take it from FLDigi or WSJTX? You can have it do whichever one makes sense. I, of course, always select the remote application because when the remote application is in a weird mode that's not necessarily in the master list of modes that is inside of the logging program, it's best just to say, just take whatever is on the other end. Because I think CQRlog thinks the radio is in data packet mode because that's the literal mode that the radio is in when it's connected to it. But obviously, if you're in FT8 or FT4, you want that sub mode to be used as the mode for the contact. So that's all within the context of setting up that FLDigi and WSJTX interface. We're almost there, guys. Almost there. The next tab is for exit and auto backup. So this is how it handles when you exit the application. And I have mine set up to auto backup after every time I close out the program. So it'll write out a tar zip of the log, the entire log. So should something not be happy right with the MySQL or MariaDB log file, you should have a nice export of your database directly in here. So by ADIF. Now be mindful back on that control where we were setting up the export defaults. If you wanted to keep track of other fields that you don't necessarily keep track of in other logging programs, this would be the time to ensure that you have all the options selected so you could rebuild your CQRlog with that export completely. There are ways to flag things as already sent to like EQSL and Logbook of the World, so you don't have to worry about a dupe in that stuff if you didn't happen to copy or export those particular flags on each log. External viewers is the next tab. This is where you set up some default apps to look at certain things. I never use it to do anything. So, but whether you want to use edit, something other than gedit for text files and events for PDFs. I don't even think I have events on my system, so I'm not sure why it's even set up that way. But those are the default apps and stuff like that. I think it's mainly for the QSL card stuff. I don't use that in the app. Callbook support. This is where you'll set up hamqth or qrz.com logging. You can use one or the other, not both, because it pretty much will use either one. If you do QRZ, obviously you need to have I think it's an XML subscription or above in order to pull the log or pull the station information every time you key in a call. Otherwise, hamqth, I believe you just need to have a login for it. RBN support. If you want to have your logging program connect directly to the RBM, you can have it do that. So you can actually look at the reverse beacon network stuff, and you can have it you can have it set up to look for certain call signs. Most people have it look for their own call signs to see how they're being received. Online log uploads is the next one. So this is some of the other connected logging areas that you can send to automatically. And one of these is hamqth. You can send your log to. ClubLog is another one. hrdlog.net for your ham radio deluxe people. And I believe those are the only three that they have set up there. And then the last one is propagation information. And it will pull from hamqsl the solar brief in order to see the actual propagation information directly in the application. And once you've set up all of that, you hit the OK button and all your stuff magically works and you don't have any problems whatsoever. Now, there's two really big main windows that I pretty much use within the application and that you would probably end up using as well should you be using it. The main window that opens up is the QSO window. So like this is where you would start typing QSOs if you need to log something. But if you were to want to look up or see your log, you would go to File and then go to your QSO list. Brings up the QSO viewer. And this will be your whole log, so you can see and filter and look at any part of your log. You can go in and edit QSOs at this point. This is also where you can send your log up to Logbook of the World, EQSL. You can also do your downloads. So if you want to download confirmations, you would do it here. You can search for stuff on HamQTH, and that's probably what would open up your default browser. And you can also look at your other online logs, your HamQTH, your club log, and everything else here. Let's see. Call book. So your call book connection, should you have brought in a log from another application or whatever, and it didn't automatically fill out like names and information from the call book, you can actually have it go back and update your database with the call book information. This is useful in some cases. I wouldn't carte blanche that across everything, only because, people are not always going to be at home when they're making these contacts. So if it differs from your logged, you will get prompted for it, but you would have to know the context of that. So whether or not they were actually at home or in some other place. So I would be very careful in doing that to any historical stuff. This here too, you can, inside this log viewer here, you can also do your statistics. So here's where you can see your DXCC statistics. You can have it rebuild it should you have made some contacts and it hadn't run the statistics update in a while. You worked all zones, your ITU, your IOTA, you worked all continents, worked all states, everything here. So if I just click on my worked all states, I can see that, based upon confirmations. Yeah, the only one I have all 50 states on is 7, so 40 meters. But obviously mixed 40 all the way across. Mixed, I have all the states. So, and you can break this down by mode. You can break it down by which way you confirmed. By default, it has all modes and all QSL types. So it'll do paper QSLs should you be logging those in your logging application, or Logbook of the World or EQSL. Sort QSL. Let's see, you can do QSL management here. You can do export label for printing. So that's where you have that being able to print those files. It also allows you the ability to use a SQL console directly in here. So an SQL console, and this would allow you to be able to go in and make any edits or search the log via SQL. So at this point, you'd probably want to know a little bit more about the structure of the data. And I would recommend learning that first before you ever go in and do anything nefarious to your log via the SQL console, because that will definitely cause you some troubles. From here, you can also do imports, exports. So when I'm logging with like not 1mm and I want to come back and bring a contest in here, I'll come in and do an import into this log, and then I can flag that, which contest it was and stuff like that, and have that bring it into the log, and then I send it up to Logbook of the World from there. All right, so that's pretty much the logbook viewer, the QSO viewer, or the show QSO list. So when we configured FLDigi and WSJTX, and technically you also have the ability to remote mode for ADIF, which means that you could probably have CQRlog connected to Grid Tracker. Reading this is that, you can do a remote mode for ADIF. So I'm assuming that means you could probably have Grid Tracker talk to this and push logs directly to CQRlog without any effort whatsoever. So that might solve any kind of interoperating with using Grid Tracker as the main source of logging. But anyway, I'll come back to that. So the remote mode for FLDigi and WSJTX. So what this does is when you click the remote mode, it will open a monitor for that application. So I'm going to say I'm doing FLDigi here, or not FLDigi, WSJTX, because we'll actually see some contacts here. So it'll open up a monitor. It'll then execute whatever application you set up. In my case, JTDX. Now, of course, you want to have JTDX set up the same way, pointing to, FL, your rig control D and your FL rig. So basically, if there's a contention issue, a locked contention issue with something using that, CQRlog does allow does basically not use rig control at that time, so that the external app can then use rig control, since it's assuming that it's going to be populating all the information with it anyway. So when you have that set up, I have mine currently just running on 10 meters here, so not many traces left. The day is kind of waning. But the CQR monitor basically has that extra layer where it looks at the calls coming through, basically what is being decoded, and it tells me the status of it within the log. So where you all know that if you're using WSGTX, unless you manage your log there, you don't really see those work befores and stuff like that. So in my case, I don't really care what JTDX keeps for a log because I don't really use it. I wanted to use always CQRlog as my authoritative source for the logging. So I always have the monitor window up just so if I'm actually hunting something, which I never do, if I'm actually hunting something, I can see whether or not I've actually have it in the log and it's confirmed or anything else like that. Because it'll tell me right away if it's a confirmed country and everything else. And you can do filtering on this as well. So you can actually peel back the noise from it. So you can say, I only want to see stuff that I haven't worked before. So basically you can kind of have that filtered, I guess what Grid Tracker would be called a call roster, directly in the monitor that CQRlog provides. Beyond actually just using FL Digi the same way, I really haven't messed with it too much because I don't do too much in FL Digi. In fact, I think we learned just last episode, I don't even have it installed on my machine currently. I just installed it the other day to see what version I would get. So I'm not going to be able to give you much information on that. So yeah, doesn't really matter. Let's see here. What else we have? Do you have long notes, ability to edit long notes in here under the main window? So you have the ability to send spots. So if you're connected to the DX cluster, you can go ahead and send a spot from something you just worked within your log program right here. So if I'm my new QSO window, so I'm in the main window where I did the remote to WSJTX, you can go ahead and set up your spot sending. This is also where you'll access your CW messages. And this also has an ability to reload the CW interface should the interface go down for any reason. Same thing with the rig control. So should rig control feel like it's stuck or whatever, you can actually have it refresh it at that point, and it'll reattempt to connect to it. You can you can do a tune as well, so that triggers your radio to transmit. And this is also where you access the preferences. And then let's see what else we got. The statistics are available here. The online log stuff is available here. Windows. So in the window drop down, this is where you'll find band map, contest, CW type, memory keys, your detailed info, your DX cluster, your gray lines. You can click that and you bring up your pretty little map with the gray line on it. Your online upload stats has a little log window to trace any uploads that you've been doing. So if you're doing live logging to Club Log and stuff like that, you would actually see the confirmations that those actually made it up to the log as they're occurring. Propagation, you can pull the propagation information. You'll see it refresh and it'll grab that. You also have the ability to pull propagation information from, looks like a German station as well. So that's kind of cool. And let's see what else here. This is also where you'll be able to turn on the WSJTX monitor if you happen to turn that off. Your grid map has that there. So if you want to see your grid locators, your worked grids and everything else, that has a map for that. Also has the X planet map that if you set that up, it would go ahead and execute that. Mine is not, so it's not there. And then if you wanted to access your rig control, this is also where you can bring it up. And that's where you'll see those band buttons that we configured as well as quick buttons to switch. And this is where you also switch which radio you're using directly here as well. So in a nutshell, it has a lot of stuff going on. Whether you use it or not, that's up to you. Now, if you've gotten this far and you're still thinking about it, Russ would like to expand a bit on his experience being a CloudLog user, which I do appreciate CloudLog. I do like it a lot. And I'm still thinking about possibly switching, but I've been doing this setup for so long, it's really hard to switch. But Russ, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience today?
Well, I'm not going to try and sell anybody on CloudLog today, but I did have a couple of things I guess I wanted to point out about the CQRlog thing. Generally speaking, when I set up a logger, I want to do things in a way that they are capable of doing, but generally nobody thinks about doing. So in my case, I wanted to have a remote database instead of the one that CQRlog sets up for itself, which is a localized MySQL, / MariaDB instance running on port 64,000. I just wanted to connect my database to a database server that already existed, which I was eventually able to do after tweaking the permissions on the database server a little bit. CQRlog wants to handle all the database manipulations and all the SQL queries, so you kind of have to give it broad control, which I don't like doing. But I mean, if you have a pretty secure password and a reasonable, if you can lock it down by IP, that's fine. Otherwise, have a really, really difficult to guess password. But you can make it work with an existing MariaDB instance, which I was able to do, eventually. I'm on a, not slow, but not super fast DSL connection here. And it seemed like database interaction was extremely sluggish across my connection, slower than I would have thought it would be when it was updating things like DXCC entities and QSL bureau managers and things like that. But ultimately, it did work. I thought the user interface was a little bit clunky. I am gonna work with updating fonts and things like that to see if I can get it to look good. I'm actually using it right now across an X connection via SSH with X Quartz as the front end on my Mac. And I have to tell you, looking at it this way, it looks a lot better than it does natively. X Quartz seems to be rendering the UI a lot better. I did have a question about how to switch the rigs, but now I see that you actually have to bring up the TRX control window to do that, so that's pretty straightforward. Everything looks pretty good. I still find the UI a little bit like Microsoft Access when it comes to updating database fields and stuff like that, which, if you know anything about that, you'll know how Web 1.0 / early 2000s we're talking. But I mean, I can see how someone could get used to the way this works and enjoy it if they spend enough time with it. I'm going to try and use it with that remote ADIF thing and see if that works. Like if I can just keep this as another repository for my QSL data, I'm going to go ahead and do that. You mentioned like right up at the top about dark mode, but how the heck does dark mode work? Is there a toggle? Because it's not in dark mode, but my computer is.
Oh, that's interesting. Because mine, I didn't have to do anything with mine. So you can see I just popped my display into the chat just so everybody can see what it looks like.
Yeah, see, I really wish mine would look like that because I'd be a lot happier with it like immediately if it was in dark mode. But that's a small thing. I'm sure I can figure out how to tweak it to get it to work. Configuration pretty straightforward. You went through all of the different options in the menu. So there's a thing about like having QTH profiles, which you didn't really go into. You don't have to have them, but if you're doing multiple locations, multiple different setups, different rigs, stuff like that, you can create station profiles to accommodate those in your logs. Overall, aside from the fact that it looks old, even though it isn't, just kind of put off. Like I said, just being able to see it in dark mode would kind of bring that forward a decade. And it would make me happier for sure. But configuration wise, seemed pretty good. Again, I kind of went a different route, but I wouldn't mind using this as a secondary place to back up. I mean, I back up to all the online resources as well, like Logbook of the World and EQSL and CQRlog and all that. But having a database with another copy of my information would be nice. And since it is in MariaDB / MySQL and having the ability to run SQL queries on it, like independent of applications, might be nice. So overall, I don't strictly hate it. I know I said earlier today that I hate it, but that's a classic overreaction, And so I like it. And now that I'm seeing it on this X Quartz window, where actually all of the fields sort of line up and everything looks nice without the benefit of dark mode, I definitely don't mind it nearly so much. Having to open up the QSL window to delete a QSL is kind of a pain. I would like to be able to do a search in the query window and be able to delete from there instead of just an edit, which doesn't give you the option to delete. I find that's a niggle, I guess, picking nits. But and one thing they definitely need to start including is POTA. POTA is so popular now; they need to put it in. So they need to keep a database of POTOs and be able to cross-reference and log that information in the database like they do with IOTA. But overall, yeah, not so bad. Now that I've actually got my hands into it and started playing around with it and not just had my sort of icky first impression of oh, this looks like it was, put out in 1998 kind of thing. I kind of dig it. So I guess we'll see.
It's kind of grown on me over the years, I've always wanted to change it to something that, looks a little bit more modern too. But I've always run into those issues, right? Using something a little different. And I just haven't settled on anything that I can stand to use.
Yeah, I mean, I as I showed you before in my little online demo via Discord, I showed you some of the high points of what I like about CQRlog. Now, for people who don't like CQRlog, it may be one of those things like Linux where you're remembering when you had to compile everything and Linux is hard and blah, 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 and it doesn't have any features and I don't want to use this piece of junk. CQRlog has come a long, long way. It's run many marathons in the past couple of years, and it's really usable. It's really functional. It's really integratable, and it's sexy. It looks good. So I'm gonna continue to use that as my primary logger. That's where I'm going to keep my authoritative records. But as I was saying before, you got to keep backups of this stuff. The online resources are great, but it's always good to have another copy somewhere because you don't want to lose your log data. You want to have all those QSOs from when you contacted that faraway DXCC entity that you forgot about 12 years ago. You don't want to lose that. So, but yeah, I can, I don't know if I'm going to vote for CQRlog, but I might in the primaries. So.
Yeah, it's definitely, it has a lot of bells and whistles that aren't very fancy looking. That's for sure. It definitely, it solves everything that I need to solve with my particular logging setup. So I've been really happy with it over the years, and beyond the few times that, changing between distros and having random issues with, the log file not being transportable because of versions of MariaDB and blah, blah, blah. And yeah. That part is a pain in the butt, and I wouldn't recommend those transitions to be very representative of most people's experience because most people don't distro hop like a crazy man like I do. So, but considering I'm still using it after all those times, it does say something for that. But yeah, if I had something like CQRlog or whatever that was on a separate box that was just isolated and blah blah, that might be something to think about too. But yeah, I'm not quite ready to do that, and then also have to worry about connecting my rig to that remotely and whatever. It just seems weird, but I guess progressive web apps running locally too are basically the same thing. So they are apps nonetheless.
That's true. The front end is just served by a web server instead of having the UI built in. But yeah, I mean, there's a use case for each thing for sure. And I won't say you've turned me on to CQRlog at this point, but I will take back my initial hate and say it looks promising. Yeah.
And they do have the one thing I used to complain about a lot is the fact that it doesn't do contest logging. But they kind of built a contest logging window, which suffices for some contests, and you can use it that way. I care not to. So I've used it, I think, for one contest this way. And then that made me decide that I'll never do it again. So I really I'm a creature of habit. I like using a contest logging specific program for doing contest logging. So right now that particular program is not 1mm, and that's been running great. And, having the ability to do that, then I just bring it into this. If I do anything remote, I log it in whatever remote application I'm doing it in, which in most cases is still .1mm because I'm doing a contest remotely. And then I just import the log here. So, this is my log that sits basically underneath WSJTX and any local contacts I make here that are not contest related. And then once the contest is over, it will then have all the contest records in here as well. So I always have all the logs in one place. So that's kind of what I use it for. And that's kind of my workflow for logging in general. And it's been that way for many, many years. So even the years that I was using Windows and DX Keeper and stuff like that, I was still using external logger for contesting. And then bringing those logs in to that application. And so I've kept the same practice all these years.
Yep, absolutely. And I can certainly understand doing that. And, I'm looking forward to working with CQRlog a little more, figuring out how to turn on dark mode, getting my data into it, which I've already done that. I've imported my log out of CloudLog just to see what it looks like and see what it can do for me going forward. But if somebody's looking for a logger, it's definitely full featured. And once you get past the initial sort of database setup hiccups, if you do it the way it wants to do it, it's pretty seamless. If you want to do a use case that's not quite the default, like me, you may run into some trouble. But once you get that sorted, it's pretty responsive. It works well, and I can see why it's popular. So I think that's all I have to say about it. I guess I'll go ahead and close the window now. So.
Yeah, and the dark mode setting, I'm pretty sure that's just, it's picking up an environment variable that you probably don't have set.
Setting.
Yeah. That just happens to be set automatically in GNOME and my particular instance. So
shouldn't require too much digging around to figure out what the problem is. So
yeah, I'm sure it's got to be an environment variable. So we'll just wait for the chat room to catch up. If there's any questions, this would be a great time to plop those in there. I see Tom is typing, so we'll let him go.
Says looks pretty slick. I'll have to put that on my dedicated Ubuntu laptop for field use. Yeah, you can certainly do worse.
Yes, I've tried worse.
We've all tried worse. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that's probably a good spot to wrap this one up. We have been talking about CQRlog forever just because I use it all the time and I generally inject it into logging conversations. So we've mentioned it in the past, but like we said, we hadn't done a full show specifically on CQRlog and kind of all the capabilities and setup and stuff like that. And I hope we were able to cover it in a way that makes some sense, considering it's not a visual context that you get through a podcast. So.
And I will say that I was able to do everything in CQRlog, including connecting the database, get it up and working, import my data, be able to view subsequent Windows propagation data, DX clustering, all that kind of stuff. I was able to do all of that without reading a single word of the manual. So I think that speaks well of how it's put together.
Yeah, it's definitely that kind of user-friendly. There's enough of indications of how things would work as long as you've used a computer before. You would be able to figure it out without much effort. It's pretty obvious where he's like, oh, okay, I guess I should go into preferences and see what I need to set up. It doesn't necessarily force you to go through and do stuff. So that's the one thing it doesn't have is the ability to walk you through what you should have to set up. But there's enough information within the context of the application, and they do have an excellent help site that has all of the information on it and is generally kept up to date. I think the version that the documentation is set up for is 2.50, and the current release version is 2.52. And I think those are just bug fixes anyways. Anyway, let's see, 2.5, what version? Yeah, 2.52.
I was using 2.52, and that was in the Bodhi repo. So,
yeah, 2.52 is the most recent in the repos. So,
all right. Well, I think that brings us down to the end of our topic for the evening. So we'll go ahead and get to the announcements and feedback. And of course, the only one we have is our Hamvention GoFundMe, which is at https://LHS.FYI/Hotel Victor 2024. We're almost halfway there, so that's good. And we appreciate everybody who's able to donate. And if you can't donate, please share. And if you can donate, please share. We appreciate it. And every little bit helps. $2, $5, whatever you have. Please donate if you can, share if you can't. And hopefully I say hopefully, it's going to happen. We'll make it happen one way or the other. But it's always nice when we have the booth covered. So we really appreciate everybody helping out with donations. And I sincerely hope this is the last time we ever have to do this. If our subscriber base keeps going up, slow and steady like it has been, and we're able to put that money away, then these GoFundMes to get to Hamvention will be a thing of the past. So help us make this the last one. That's all I have to say about that. And since Cheryl is here, not here, she's not here. Well, she's here in spirit, I suppose, but she's not here. So I'll have to run down through the subscriber, supporters, and live participants list. And in that vein, we had for Facebook, Tony Cressetto. On YouTube, we had Victor Hugo. On Instagram, we had 5SD107_YV9PD, which sounds like just a bunch of letters, but I think that YV9PD is suspiciously like a call sign. So we also had PY1Z Bravo. On Mastodon, we had Alex Pareja, JR, VE7WYC, that's Whiskey Yankee Charlie, and 2 Echo Zero Delta Kilo Kilo. No merch sales. On the mailing list, we had Rockin' the Tree. I don't know if that's rockin' the tree, like rocking around the clock, or there's a rock in the tree. No indication either way. So, and then finally, we had our live show chatters tonight, and we had a pretty good crowd. We had Jill, K1TTZ, Tony, K4XSS, Ted, WA0EIR, John, K1BTZ, Joel, KC0YEW, Winston, KD2WLL, Danilo Than 69, which I think he has a call sign. I have to ask him about that before too long. Chuck, do you have a call sign? Are you still here? He's not still here. Of course not. We'll figure that out. And then we have Paul, KE5WMA, and Tom, N for hi, which is HAI. So there you go. And all right. That brings us down to the end of the show. So thanks, everybody, for listening. We're glad you were here with us for this deep dive. Check us out next week when we'll have a short topics episode. And we hope you have a great week in between. And in the meantime, we'll let you get back to whatever it is you were doing before you started listening to this. So for the absent, Cheryl, W5MOO, this has been episode number 534 of Linux in the Ham Shack. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD73.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a community-sponsored podcast. Our website is located at lhspodcast.info. You can support the podcast by visiting the LHS Patreon page at patreon.com/LHS Podcast, or by using the contribute list on the homepage. We have a presence on Discord, Facebook, IRC, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also drop us an email at info@lhspodcast.info or leave us a voicemail at 1-909-LHS-SHOW. That's 1-909-547-7469. Visit the online LHS merchandise store at shop.lhspodcast.info for fun and fashionable show-themed merchandise. Until next time, remember to always heed your hedonism.